Hello everyone, my name is Ashish and welcome to the X-Admin channel. So this is the part 2 session of Core Java interview questions and answers. So in the part 1, we have discussed the following question like what is a Java, where the Java is used, and what is the compiler in Java, what is JVM, what is JDK, and we have discussed these topics in a very detail. So I will suggest you to watch the previous lecture if you have not watched the part 1 of this. So now let's move to the part 2 and start our discussion. So the next question what you can get is like what is JRE? So JRE is a Java runtime environment and it is a set of components to create and run a Java application. So basically a JRE is a set of component which is used to create and run a Java application. So JRE is a part of Java development kit and in my part 1 session I have already discussed about a Java development kit. So you can watch that lecture for the further information regarding the Java development kit. So JRE is a part of Java development kit and Java runtime environments provide all the libraries and all other resources in order to run the Java program. So basically the main function of the JRE is to provide the libraries and the other resources to run a Java program. So Java runtime environment is a part of a Java development kit. It has a Java classes, libraries, and a specific tools and a standalone JVM. So it is the most common environment available on a device to run a Java program. So the source Java code get compiled and converted to the Java bytecode. So if you wish to run this bytecode on any platform, you required a JRE. So basically you have a source code and the source code is compiled. So it will get converted to a bytecode. Now to run this bytecode, basically you require environment. So this environment is a Java runtime environment. So Java runtime environment is used to run your bytecode, which is converted from your source code. So JRE loads classes, verify access to memory, and retrieve the system resources. So what is the work of JRE? JRE loads the classes. Second, it's verify the access to memory. Third, it retrieves the system resources. So JRE act as a layer on the top of your operating system. So if the question come into interview, then you have to simply say JRE is a Java runtime environment and it is the one of the component to create and run a Java application, right? And it is a part of a Java development kit. So what does the JRE do? You have to say JRE loads the classes, it's verify access to memory, and it retrieve the system resources, right? So in this way, you have to reply in your interview. So now let's move to the second question. That is, yeah. So this is the most important question, and also it is somewhere a very confusion for the developer that what is the difference between the JDK and the JRE and the JVM. So if you want to get detailed information on this topic like JDK and JVM, so you can watch my part 1 of this series. So now let's see what is the difference of JDK, JRE and JVM. So simply you have to say and understand that JDK are used to develop Java software. So JDK is a kit. It is a whole kit and it is used to develop a Java software. And JRE. So JRE provides programming tool and development technologies. So JRE provides the programming tools and the development technologies. So what is JVM? So JVM executes Java program. So JVM task is to execute the Java program, right? So in the diagram you can see that the inner circle, the very inner circle is JVM. So JVM task is to execute the Java program, and JVM plus the Java classes libraries are called as JRE, Java Runtime Environment. So Java Runtime Environment are contains Java class libraries plus a JVM, right? So a very outer circle you can see a JDK. So JDK is a tool. Okay, it is a development tool or a kit where it contains Java C and the Java heap memory and the Java console, etc., plus the JRE, right? So JRE plus JVM forms a JDK. So JDK are used to develop a Java software, uh, and the JRE provides programming tools and development technologies, and the JVM execute the Java program. So this is the main difference between these three. So you have to reply in the same way to the interviewer, and yeah. So this way. So now let's move to the third question, that what is an interpreter? So basically, an interpreter is a program with a name of java.exe. It's responsible to convert byte code to a native code line by line, right? So interpreter in Java is a computer program or a software that implements Java virtual machine and run Java application or a Java program, right? So the function of an interpreter is to it translate or convert byte code to a machine code, and machine code is also known as a native code. So it translate byte code to a machine code or a native code line by line during the runtime. So interpreter reads line by line and it converts the byte code to a native code line by line. And in other word, we can say the Java interpreter is a computer program that converts high level program into a assembly language or a machine language. So these are the definition you have to say, that interpreter is a program, a computer program or a computer application that converts the high level program into a assembly language, and it is used for executing Java programs, right? Interpreter takes byte code as an input and execute that code by converting it to a machine code. So basically, in a diagram you can see that there is a .java file which is written by a developer, so it is called as a Java source code, right here. So this is the source code, and the compiler compiles this uh, source code, and it get converted to a byte code. So now byte code is interpret, and then it will convert it to a machine code, and now the JVM will run this machine code or a native code, and it will give the output, right? So interpreter is a program, and it is used to convert this byte code to a native code or a machine code. So now let's see the main function of the interpreter. So the main function of the interpreter is to convert the byte code instructions to a machine code line by line at a runtime without changing the sequence. Second point, it performs all the activities of Java runtime system. Third point, it runs application program by reading and interpreting by bytecode files, right? So interpreter is a program which is responsible to convert bytecode to a native code line by line. So now let's move to our next slide. So now let's see the feature of an interpreter. So this is the like can be the one of the important questions, like feature of interpreter. So if the interviewers comes to the part of an interpreter, then he can go deep into this topic, and he can ask you any type of questions regarding this topic. So in the same way, I have framed this session that you can get a depth insight regarding this topic. So now let's see the feature of the interpreter. So an interpreter is easy to use for the beginners. Second point, it acts as an like mediator between the Java virtual machine and a real machine. So it acts as a mediator. Third point, interpreter programs is different for different machines, right? So interpreter program is different for a different machine. It is a platform dependent, because interpreter program will be different for a different machines or a different OS, right? So fourth point, translate the source code into a machine specific code line by line at a runtime without changing the sequence. Fifth point, each error of the every line is displayed one by one by the interpreter. So as the interpreter reads the program line by line and it converts the byte code into a machine code line by line, so it gives the error of of the line. If it is has, then it will give error line by line and display line by line. Okay. So the next point is that interpreter executes the program at a slower speed while comparing to a compiler. So interpreter executes a program at a slower speed while comparing to a compiler, and it spend less time on analyzing and processing the program, right? So this is the certain features of the interpreter. Now let's move to the next question. So it can be like, what is a JIT compiler in Java? So in Java, basically a JIT compiler is used. So it's stand for just in time. So stands for just in time compiler, which reads byte code at a time and converts to a native code at a time. So in the like interpreter, it's read the line one by one, and it's give the error uh, line by line. But compiler reads a byte code at a time and then it converts the native code at a time. So it is faster process in compared to the interpreter. So this is a faster in process. So internally, this uses a V table concept to store the information about the byte code and a native code. So what is V table? Actually, a V table is a virtual table. So in Java, just-in-time compiler maintain a virtual table internally to read the byte code at a time and then convert this to a native code. So what do you mean by like a V table? So basically, the V table is actually quite simple, though it is little complex to describe in a word, but I will try to make you understand. Okay. So first, every class that uses virtual function. So actually, let's say that a developer has written some source code. As the Java compiles this code, so in that program there may be n number of methods or functions, right? So every class that uses a virtual functions is given its own virtual table. So what happens here? uh, Compiler maintain a virtual table. So in this table is simply a static array. So this virtual table is basically a static array that the compiler set up at a compile time. So at a compile time, compiler creates a static array inside a table, and a virtual table contains one entry for each virtual function. So let's say that source code has some functions. So this function will be stored, their pointer will be stored in a array inside this virtual table. Okay. So virtual table contains one entry for each virtual functions. So there may be n number of functions in a class. So all that functions will be maintained in an array inside your inside a table. So that's why it is called a virtual table. And 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 that can be called by object of that class. So that function are called by a object of a class. So each entry in this table is simply a function pointer that points to the most derived function accessible to that class. So basically, in a layman language, you can understand the V table is a set of array, and this set of array are maintained internally by a compiler. So it in that array, pointer of that function are stored, so that the compiler can compile the code or can convert the code in a very faster manner, right? So under this v table or a virtual table, it maintains two information, one for the byte code and the second one is for the native code, right? So this is all about a JIT compiler. So now, so this can be the like one of the important question at the interpreter versus compiler. So now let's see the difference between the interpreter and a compiler. So simply you have to say, as we know, interpreter translate program line by line, and compiler translates the entire program together in a one shot, right? Second point, execution process of the interpreter is slower. Execution process of a compiler is faster. This is the second point. Third point, interpreter takes less compile time and compiler takes more time. Fourth point, interpreter will not produce intermediate object code. Compiler produces intermediate object code. Fifth point, interpreter compiles the program until an error is found. So interpreter basically read line by line, and it will try to compile the code line by line until or unless a error is found. Okay, as the error is found, it will stop. But the compiler shows all the array once at the end of the compilation. So basically, in the compiler, it is going to compile the code, and then it is going to show all the errors present at the end of the compilation. So this is the main difference of the interpreter and a compiler. So the next difference where it is used, mostly the Python, PHP, Ruby and the Perl uses an interpreter, and where the compiler is used, so these can be used by Java, C++, Scala and C. So compiler can be used here. So this is the some of the points which differentiate the interpreter and a compiler, and this is the important like interview questions also. Yeah. So in this way, we have completed our like second session of the basic interview questions for core Java. So in the next lecture, in the part 3, we are going to discuss about some like platform, that why that what is platform, and also why Java is a platform independent in a very detailed manner. And also we are going to see some of the features of a Java programming language, and also the very important question, that is difference between the Java and the C++, right? So these are the questions we are going to discuss in our like next lecture. So till then, thank you and see you in the session 3.